everybody, and welcome to today's video. And in today's video, I'll be discussing why the Democratic Party doesn't really need to worry about 2024. Democrats, I guess, don't need to worry about 2024 necessarily. Now, the reason that they would potentially is because of Ron DeSantis and Kamala Harris potentially being each party's nominees. DeSantis, a lot of people built him up as a phenomenal nominee, almost like Mitt Romney with Trump appeal to the working class with phenomenal rural numbers, and they build up Harris as a bad candidate who has no appeal practically anywhere. And I don't necessarily stand by that. I've been fairly critical of Ron DeSantis' appeal or his strength electorally. I think that he's probably still the GOP's strongest nominee, but I don't think that he's significantly stronger than Trump. Yes, Trump was a very strong nominee, and yes, DeSantis is a very strong nominee. They're both very good nominees, but I don't think that they should be given this this I'm trying to this like I don't think that they should be put in this image that they are of, or not even necessarily them, because Trump's put as an awful candidate by a lot of people, which also doesn't make much sense if they think that RDS is amazing. It's confusing. But I don't think that RDS is amazing. I think that Trump could easily be better than him. But whatever. So I'm going to get started by discussing why they don't necessarily need to worry. So looking at this and looking at the states that could be competitive or that could be brought up frequently. Nevada, Arizona, Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Georgia are probably the most likely to be brought up. Potentially North Carolina or Florida, but it's unlikely. Because we're talking about how the GOP could flip it, or how they could win, and why they likely won't in this scenario. So looking at this, Nevada, DeSantis is not going to get the same rural numbers that Trump was able to get. He's not going to turn out as many rural voters. Harris is going to do better with Hispanic and Latino voters than Biden. She's obviously stronger, but now she also has this incumbency. She's the incumbent vice president, yes, but still an incumbency. And I think that's going to help her. Hispanic and Latino voters tend to shift towards incumbents, and I see that being a very strong point for her, and I see her being able to still carry the state. Probably narrower, yes. I could see her being more, looking at she's strong with Hispanic and Latino voters. And RDS just won't be able to get the same rural numbers. The suburbs, they're already really blue. He may do nearly better in the suburbs, but it won't necessarily mean much. Although RDS, he's going to probably do pretty well in the rural areas just because Harris is not going to do well with rural voters. But in Arizona, this is I think one of the most likely flips the RDS could have. The thing is about Arizona, the major demographics are Hispanic and Latino voters and traditional conservatives in the suburbs. People tend to think that in Arizona's suburbs, RDS would be a very good candidate because he has more traditional appeal, which I actually I really disagree with. I don't think that he has. I think that he does have more appeal, yes, but it's not exactly a lot. Looking at 2018, and yes, I'm aware this was a blue wave or whatever. It wasn't really a blue wave. It was a blue wave, but not a significant blue wave. And DeSantis won by 0.4. If you're trying to tell me, unless you think that Florida was a D+5 state, then DeSantis did poorly in the suburbs. He did poorly in the suburban county of Duval. Unless you think it was a D+4 state, he did poorly in Pinellas County. Unless you think it was, D+3.5, whatever. Unless you think that it was D+2, roughly D+2, then he did bad in Seminole. These are suburban counties where he did very, very poorly. He did all right in Jefferson County, similar performance to Trump, and an all right performance in Monroe County. But looking at a lot of these suburban counties, yes, they shifted to the left, and yes, they all flipped. But that means that they would have not the suburbs in the state shifted to the right. But even if you look at the exit polls, DeSantis won the suburbs by about 8%. Trump won the suburbs by about 11%, which means DeSantis carried it by about 3% less than Trump. Now, if you want to go factor in the wave, depending on how much you think, or where you think Florida was at the time. If you think it was where it was in 2016, was roughly R plus 1, or roughly R plus 1.5. In which case, it means that the suburbs would have shifted roughly which means that the wave would have shifted at roughly 1% to the left, in which case DeSantis would have won the suburbs by 9%, an underperformance of Trump. If you think it was where it was in 2020, which was R plus 3.5 roughly, means that the wave would have shifted at 3% to the left, which means DeSantis would have performed very similarly. He would have narrowly overperformed Trump in 2016 and performed roughly the same as Trump in 2020. That is not good. DeSantis is not. We've seen before that he's not a phenomenal suburban candidate. And I mean, like, the suburbs are going to continue to shift to the left. So in 2018, if you got a roughly similar performance to 2020 Trump, if that's assuming that Florida's more conservative than probably where it actually was, the suburbs will have shifted significantly over the span of 6 years. I don't see him being a phenomenal suburban candidate. And I see Harris probably narrowly carrying the state of Arizona. Yes, he'll do better in the suburbs. Or yes, he's better in the suburbs, but I don't think that's going to be able to do much for him in Arizona. I think he's still going to probably be able. I think he's still probably going to lose it. In Georgia, DeSantis is not a very good candidate for the state of Georgia. He's going to do really poorly in Atlanta suburbs. I think that as they continue to diversify, he's pretty weak with minority voters. I mean, he did pretty well with the Hispanic and Latino vote. I think he performed similarly to Trump. Which is McGillum was a progressive. You can expect that with most progressive candidates. But yes, he did do fairly well with the Hispanic and Latino vote. Similarly to Trump, I think that with the shift, there's a decent chance that you could have narrowly. Or actually, I think he still underperformed him, but he could have performed similarly to Trump in Florida with Florida's Hispanic and Latino vote, which is significantly more conservative. But other than that, I mean, like he's not great with minorities. Actually, I think he did decent with the black vote in 2018. But then again, the black vote in Florida makes up like 9% of the electorate, so it's not a very large presence. But in Georgia, in Atlanta, in these suburbs, we're seeing these suburbs continue to shift to the left. We're seeing them to continue to diversify. I think that with people like Stacey Abrams in Georgia, we're going to see the black vote somehow, or I think it's going to be even more liberal. I mean, like, it's still probably the most lopsided demographic in the U.S., other than maybe white rural voters in, like, Wyoming or something. But I really see RDS just not being able to have the same numbers in the suburbs. I don't see him being able to get the rural turnout either. I mean, like, he's not going to get the same rural numbers as Trump. I mean, like, he'll be able to get a lot, and he'll probably do better, but it'll probably result in maybe a narrower performance, if not underperformance. It's going to be weird, but Harris will still probably manage to hang on. It'll be definitely competitive, yes. But Harris is still probably going to be able to hang on, especially as the suburbs continue to shift to the left, and especially as Atlanta continues to grow. Now, the Rust Belt, this is where I think DeSantis may actually have a chance. This is where he could potentially flip it by flipping the Rust Belt. He could win with this, but I'll explain why it's highly unlikely that he does. In Wisconsin, this is probably the most likely flip for RDS, and in reality, he's probably going to flip it. But looking at this, Harris is probably going to be able to retain enough turnout from Milwaukee. She might even be able to raise it a little. She's pretty strong with the black vote. Not necessarily strong. She's probably above average for a Democrat with the black vote. The problem is going to be with RDS and turning out the working class. What I feel like a trend that we might see if this is the scenario is less working class voters turning out, but then being more lopsided for RDS. Although I'll tell you why I could see Harris doing decent enough with the working class. A few reasons. Number one, it's because, I mean, like, if the Biden economy is successful, then, I mean, like, she's realistically going to do well with the working class. They tend to like to vote on the economy. Or another reason is they were traditional Democrats. I mean, like, they were Democratic voters that liked Trump, so they turned out and voted for Trump. I mean, like, looking at other scenarios, most other Republicans performed poorly with the working class. I see DeSantis not doing amazing enough or not doing well enough with the working class. With Harris retaining enough turnout, it's going to be very close. Um, it really depends though on DeSantis' suburban strength. He's narrowly better than Trump in the suburbs. It could Wisconsin's probably a toss up. Just to be nice to RDS, I'm going to give him Wisconsin. Now we have with Michigan and Pennsylvania. In Michigan, actually, let's do Pennsylvania first. Michigan's almost certainly not going to flip. Pennsylvania, RDS is not going to get the same rural numbers as Trump. He will probably do better in the Philly suburbs, and Harris is a good suburban candidate as well. That's another problem with RDS. Harris is a pretty strong suburban candidate. But in Pennsylvania, in Philly, Harris is going to be able to retain enough turnout. She's going to be able to do well enough for the black vote. In the rural areas, DeSantis, I just don't see him turning out enough rural voters to be able to win. He could turn out a lot, and I could see him winning. PA is probably another toss up. I'll be nice to DeSantis and I'll give it to him. Harris is not going to be able to do the same turnout that she needs in Pittsburgh, because she is too establishmentarian. She's going to do pretty poorly there. Trump, narrowly carried it in 2016, Pennsylvania. That was Trump, though. DeSantis is not great in the rural areas. He's not going to get Trump rural numbers. He could narrowly carry it by 0.1, 0.2. It's highly unlikely, but I will give it to him to be nice. Now, the final state, Michigan. DeSantis can't get the rural numbers that Trump can. Hillary barely lost it. Harris is going to retain enough turnout from Detroit. She's going to do well enough with black voters in Detroit. The suburbs are going to continue to shift to the left. And DeSantis is not going to be able to turn out enough rural voters to the point where it will narrowly go to Harris. I think that DeSantis' path to victory, he can't carry Michigan. His way to win is through Arizona, which means that he would have to win Wisconsin, which is probably narrowly favoring him. Win Pennsylvania, which is probably a toss-up that's maybe narrowly favoring Harris. And then flip Arizona, which is narrowly favoring Harris, which is it's why it's so unlikely that he wins. It would just take a lot. I don't know that he can actually win in this scenario. It's definitely possible if the GOP want to win. If they wanted to win, they would probably hope that AOC is the nominee. But if AOC is not the nominee, Harris is probably going to be the nominee. Harris or Biden. If they want to beat Harris, DeSantis is probably their best bet. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you enjoyed it, please leave a like below. Stay tuned for my next video tomorrow. Subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.